Canadian exports autos and metals and mining materials. So it's going to be a big issue, I think. So something to watch. I don't know. I mean, Canada's pretty defiant. And of course, we've been following the trade story for years. And like the Trump administration doesn't respond well to defiance, whether you think you agree with the Trump administration's approach to tariffs or not. It does strike me that defiance ends up actually causing problems. We saw this last year with China. When China got defiant, Donald Trump just ratcheted up the tariffs. So
he doesn't respond well to that.
He doesn't respond well to, what he responds well to is, you sort of have to kiss the ring, if you will.
Yes.
And he likes to know that he has the power. He does have the power of the United States economy behind him. That tends to be when you get a deal done, is you tend to be more deferential, as you talk about. I think Mexico's handled it quite well, maybe because they're aware of their sort of power position relative to the United States, whereas Canada almost has a sort of a defiance element to it, a lot like Europe and how they've responded to some of the European countries. So it's something to watch, but it's certainly going to impact our markets here in freight, particularly in the auto sector, but also raw materials. I mean, again, Canada is an extraction country. They have made some exceptions in like petrochemicals and energy, which I think is interesting because that's some of the primary exports. But this could escalate. And as we've seen the Trump administration, is if they don't feel like they're winning, they will continue to escalate until they feel like they've gotten what they want, their pound of flesh. So it's something to watch, something we'll pay attention to. But let's get to the headlines.
We kick things off at the Texas border, where U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers uncovered a massive narcotics smuggling operation hiding in plain sight. On August 11th, at the Roma International Bridge, CBP officers directed a 2012 tractor-trailer arriving from Mexico to secondary inspection. The vehicle was carrying a declared commercial detergent shipment. Using non-intrusive inspection equipment and a canine team, authorities discovered 240 bundles concealed within the detergent load. The packages contained a staggering 1,071 pounds of suspected methamphetamine, with CBP estimating a street value exceeding $9.57 million. Officers seized the drugs and turned the driver, tractor-trailer, and suspected narcotics over to the Roma Police Department for criminal investigation. Port Director Andres Guerra credited technology and frontline vigilance with identifying the contraband in what appeared to be routine freight. Over in the intermodal sector, Road One Intermodal Logistics is aggressively expanding its Port of Charleston footprint through strategic acquisition. The Randolph, Massachusetts-based provider announced it has acquired Higgins Transport Service, a Charleston-based provider of port drayage and intermodal transportation services. The deal adds 15 drivers to Road One's Charleston operations, along with additional drayage and intermodal capacity to serve the southeastern market. Road One recently opened a massive 384,000 square foot facility in Summerville, South Carolina, to serve the Port of Charleston, with the 100-acre property providing transloading, storage, and distribution services across the southeast. The company plans to add a 279,700 square foot warehouse on the property next year. Executive Vice President J.C. Carruthers said the acquisition strengthens Road One's commitment to providing service throughout the Southeast Global Trade Corridor. Finally, major leadership upheaval is rocking the trucking industry's most prominent trade organization. Chris Spear is out as president and CEO of the American Trucking Associations, effective immediately. In a statement released Friday afternoon, ATA said Spear informed the executive committee that he would be departing. A TA chairman, Greg Hodgen, CEO of Grondike Transport, thanked Spear for more than a decade of service to the association and the industry. Spear had recently observed his 10-year anniversary in the role and was just beginning an extension of his contract. A 5-year deal signed in 2021 was extended in 2024 until 2029. Hodgen said a search has begun to identify ATA's next president and CEO, while assuring members that the organization remains strong, focused, and fully engaged in delivering results.
So Chris Spear is out, Julie. I was talking to people over the weekend that said that there's a lot of conversation about this for the last couple of months. It's been something that's been sort of circulating. The ATA's revenues are down, membership is down. But also, look, we have been, I've been critical of Chris Spear for some of his positions. And specifically the truck driver shortage, this narrative that has continued to come on, and the effort to eliminate some of the barriers to entry. I think a lot of the sort of movement of the ATA did an enormous amount of damage to its own members. And Chris Spear was I know that he was acting on behalf of the organization, the association, but his ardent, really vitriol at anyone who came out and questioned this driver shortage narrative, including me. He came at me a few times, accusing me of having an agenda as it related to trying to drive clicks versus telling the truth. The fact is, the data was very clear that there has been no truck driver shortage, and the data, we are in a security, safety, and economic crisis at the same time, caused by too many truck drivers.
Right.
And why the ATA...
And the wrong truck drivers.
The wrong truck drivers, and why do that's a great point, why do the ATA not point that out? And look, I've said that if I were running the ATA, and I have no interest to do so, but if I were running it, I would say we have too many truck drivers, we have too many of the wrong ones. And ATA was not, was certainly under Spear, was going to a different narrative. They were sort of attacking anyone who came at and pointed out that they were wrong on the truck driver shortage. And really what's interesting about this is it dismisses so much of the work that the ATA does that's important for our industry. They focus on a lot of issues that our industry should focus on. But this particular one of deregulating the industry and lowering the barriers to entry, I think, is going to be sort of the legacy of Chris Spear.
Yeah, and I think, so absolutely, we're all aligned that there was damage done to the safety of our industry, as well as, to me, the reputation of our industry with having drivers, on the road who really aren't compliant and who aren't safe and don't meet the standards that many of us, all of us should believe are there.
This is well documented.
But I want to dig in a little bit more to what you said, that it did damage to its own members. So historically, its own members are large trucking companies, right? So bringing in all of these smaller non-compliant drivers did do damage to them as they remain compliant.
So if you think about, there was this effort to deregulate the industry, create less barriers to entry. And I think the narrative, the thinking was that the larger carriers, the members of the ATA, would be the beneficiary of they would still have gone through, I think the thinking was that they would go through the training process, drivers would access this new pool of drivers, they would go through the training process, buy these large fleets, and then what you would have, the output of that would be a compliant, safe driver. And I think that was the effort that the ATA was focused on. What they didn't expect or anticipate or understand maybe is that there was something else happening in the market, which was this undercurrent of bad actors, some of them tied to organized crime, that were taking advantage of the lower barriers to entry. And what we got out of it was a collapse in freight rates, the fact that the driver, these non-domiciled drivers, these non-compliant drivers flooded our industry. It made it so that the compliant motor carriers couldn't survive. They couldn't compete. And it was a race to the bottom on rates. Everybody lost in that. And what happened is, in order to survive, some of those carriers started to cut back on their maintenance, started to cut back on training. Not true for the largest carriers, but certainly the ones in the mid-market that were struggling just couldn't make the kinds of investments they needed to make. And meanwhile, these non-compliant motor carriers, these bad actors, were thriving, doing quite well, while everyone else was suffering. And that's really what this is all about. And I think ultimately, I don't think Chris Spear is solely to blame. I don't even think he necessarily set out I don't think he understood. I talked to Chris Spear years ago about the truck driver shortage. And he made a comment to me almost as if I was supposed to agree. He said, "Can you believe that there are people who believe there's no truck driver shortage?" And I said, "Actually, that's true, Chris, that you cannot have a perpetual driver shortage that does not get fixed through economics." And he just believed it, and I think it really blinded him. A lot of the data that came from the ATA reinforced this idea of a driver shortage, when reality was that we had way too many participants that came into the market that destroyed the safety, security, and economics of our industry. And I think the industry is better for him leaving, because I think what it does is we're able to move on to something more productive, and as an industry come together to solve these problems.
I don't believe that maybe there were ill intentions.
I don't think there was ill
think there
intentions, no.
were.
I think some of the drivers believe that. Some of the ex-commentary believes it. They always believe it.
It was that was, we need to continue to have drivers on our roads. It's hard to retain and hire drivers and recruit drivers, right? I think that was probably the underlying.
It was completely the underlying
absolutely
message.
other consequences that came from it that to your point, our industry is not better for. So.
Yeah, for sure. So it's something that we will, I'm sure we'll cover more on that as we go.
Okay. With that, we are going to take a really quick break and be right back with our first guest.
The drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, and crews who keep the world moving deserve tools that work as hard as they do. That's what Samsara builds, technology for safer, more efficient operations, made with the people who do the work. Samsara, built with operators for operators. Learn more at samsara.com.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me, and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited, and I hope to see you in class.
All right, welcome back. We are going to get into our highway segment, Verified by Highway, and then we'll get into our first guest. We've been following the story out of Texas, where Customs and Border Protection officers at the Roma International Bridge found more than $9.5 million in suspected methamphetamine hidden inside a commercial detergent shipment, uncovering 240 packages weighing over 1,000 pounds after a non-intrusive imaging scan flagged anomalies in the trailer. It's the latest case tied to a broader pattern. The FBI is now searching for a fugitive identified only as no name given Kamal, allegedly connected to an international drug trafficking investigation called Operation Hardball, in which federal prosecutors charged 37 defendants after investigators uncovered cocaine and methamphetamine networks allegedly using long-haul trucks to move narcotics from the U.S. into Canada. All charges remain allegations, and courts presume every defendant innocent unless prosecutors prove guilt. Our Fraud Watch segment, Verified, is brought to you by Highway.
Welcome back. So we've got Keith Moore. He is the CEO of AutoScheduler AI. AutoScheduler is in the warehouse automation business. Welcome, Keith, to FreightWaves today.
Thank you. Really appreciate you both having me.
So let's talk about what AutoScheduler is for those that aren't familiar with the business. What is it you guys do for warehouses?
Yeah, so we're an AI-powered warehouse orchestration platform, which is a fancy way of saying as warehousing gets more complex, you need software to help actually control all of the decision points, where your people are, what your automation is doing, what inventory is released when, so that you're maximizing overall flow through a facility, maximizing service, reducing overall cost, and ensuring the supply chain keeps running.
So how did you get into this business in terms of what made you decide to go this route?
Yeah, I actually, so I grew up in a supply chain family. I swore I was never going to go into supply chain. I was probably one of the lucky few that got to summer vacation or vacation in general to Inland Empire and actually go walk warehouses because my dad was a supply chain consultant. So I went and I actually got kind of a mechanical engineering degree, worked in AI. So I actually helped launch an AI unicorn here in Austin, Texas. And in about 2018, started to talk with my dad about what the future of supply chain looked like. So he and I decided that we were going to take a project that he had initially built for Procter & Gamble, small supply chain there, and scale that into a sustainable AI business around how can you actually orchestrate these facilities in the most complex supply chains on the planet. So we did that 2020. We've scaled the business through 2026 and still going.
So Keith, what was the business that you started prior to AutoScheduler?
Yeah, so it was a company called Spark Cognition. I was not the CEO of that business. I ran product and scaled that company, but went through Series A, Series B, up through Series D, became a unicorn, learned a little bit about starting and growing a company, and also learned a lot about AI. I've been in machine learning and AI since 2012. I don't know when you get to say you're an expert, but I feel like I'm pretty close at this point.
Well, certainly got more lessons. You've been in doing this longer. You got more tenure than most AI, quote unquote, experts do. I don't know, like you said, if anyone's an AI expert. But let's talk a little bit about what it's like running a business today versus joining a company that's on a growth trajectory. What was the one thing that you've learned running this business that maybe you naively misunderstood that has been different and maybe more challenging than you expected?
Yeah. So one thing I love about supply chain, what you see is what you get, even though it represents such a huge amount of global GDP. The thing that, and this is actually the very first thing that I have on our company website, is do what you say you're going to do. I was meeting with one of the premier investors in supply chain globally, and I asked him how he picked businesses. And this was in 2020 as we're trying to get off the ground. He said, I look at companies and I find the ones that do what they say they're going to do. They keep their promises, and those are the companies that are going to be successful. It's a really simple thing that a lot of startups and a lot of businesses get wrong. And so when we started AutoScheduler, that was our whole thesis is we're going to build out this platform. We're going to do one thing. We're going to be excellent at that one thing, and we're going to scale the business that way.
I think it's hard, though, as a founder, because you start out with an idea. Oftentimes the market data, trying to find product market fit is different. When you started this business, what was the original concept and how have you evolved it?
Yeah, we were super fortunate. So our launch client in 2020 was Procter & Gamble. They're huge, meaning, and they're also, according to Gartner, one of the premier supply chains everybody wants to model. So we started the company with a pretty battle-tested theory already, which was when we did a network analysis. So you think of any network, any supply chain network, you have all these facilities, and you hear the same things about supply chain practice, which is people, process, and technology, and all three need to be aligned. Well, Procter & Gamble already had the technology, right? They had standardization. They already had the exact same process across their network globally, and they had the same hiring practice. And so when we looked at them and their supply chain, their question was, why the heck do we have these sites that are underperforming and sites that are absolutely blowing their numbers out of the water? And what it came down to in their network was that the decision making on the floor in each of these facilities, so think of the management staff in any warehouse, there are anywhere from 5 to 10 decision makers at a point in time that actually say, here's the trucks we're working, here are the orders, here's how we're going to sequence everything. If those people were not aligned, not only inter-shift, but intra-shift, that site lost productivity. And so when we launched the business, right, it was with this battle-tested case that we'd already proven at Procter & Gamble. And so we were fortunate that really from then on, it was education and scale. But I will, to your question, say that how we've had to do that has been a challenge, right? Just going and saying, hey, I built this thing for P&G, it works really well, you should buy it too, doesn't really work. And so as AI has become more prevalent in supply chain, we've been able to actually adapt our message to what's been more native to us to begin with, and saying, you want these AI tools, but you want those that do the thing they say they're going to do, you should work with us, and we can actually help your business adopt AI as well as meet your supply chain objectives at the end of the day. So I wouldn't say that our thesis has changed since foundation, but how we've gone about doing that and messaging it has.
So Keith, similar story, grow up in an industry that you swear you're not going to be a part of, and then get sucked in and are in it, neck deep, and end up, hopefully you're similar to me, absolutely loving it. But I want to talk a little bit about what you just said. And I read in our notes in a survey that only 4% of supply chain operations have deployed robotics beyond a single point. So how do you go from just one repeatable task to actually influencing those decisions to be more efficient and effective?
Yeah, really good question. And I'm going to lead in, and I'm actually going to ask you guys a question, which is, have either of you read The Goal? No is a perfectly, it is like,
I feel like I have, at least familiar with the book, but I read
I've
so
heard of it,
often
but I don't know that I've read
a lot of
it.
times these business books just, so tell us about it.
So to answer the question about The Goal, and to answer the question and then talk a little bit about something, in supply chain, you have this concept called theory of constraints. And in The Goal, that the whole book, it is actually a really well-written story about the theory of constraints, because turn out, if you title a book The Theory of Constraints, no one's going to read it. And so what the whole philosophy is about is that there is always a bottleneck in any process of operation. So it's in industrial engineering and mathematics term. And so what you're talking about, particularly in a warehouse, and you're talking about automation and adoption, is that what automation has done for warehouses is it's introduced complexity. So in a simple sense, a warehouse is this big node in a supply chain, and you unload inventory and then you load inventory, and that's really all its function is. But at the end of the day, when you're introducing robotics and you're introducing new processes, so for example, consumer behaviors have changed, which means that buying behaviors have changed from a retailer perspective, or e-commerce is now much more prevalent than it was in 2020. All of these new stages of how that inventory gets delivered inside of a warehouse has changed, meaning you're not just unloading and loading trucks, you're also doing packaging, repackaging, value-added service. There goes from being one pick area where a guy would get a list of orders and go out and pick them, to there are 17 different pick areas, and depending on the SKU, the velocity, the requirements, all of the inventory and all of the orders could potentially be batched out across all of them to combine onto a single truck at the end of the day. So why the theory of constraints is important is that as you add more complexity, which is more flows inside of a warehouse, the decision-making has to change so that your objective is to maximize the overall flow of that inventory and the service of what we're actually delivering on time in full. And the bottleneck might change by the minute, right? So if you have automation that gets dropped in, so we'll use automated guided vehicles, AGVs, that are just moving pallets back and forth in a simple CPG warehouse, for example. The introduction of those AGVs means that they do things at a certain rate, and you can only ever operate that process at that rate. So the handoffs to and from the AGVs have to be managed perfectly. And so that level of complexity has created more and more decision points, more and more velocity of decisions in warehouses. And that results in more and more failures of automation to be fully adopted, because they might have the robot that's able to do the task, but not the decision framework and process to actually manage the overall flow through the operation. Long answer, but I hope it made sense.
It does. And my friends in my cohort, when I did my MBA, as well as my professors, would be incredibly disappointed that I said I didn't remember doing this, because I did an entire project on this book in my MBA program, as well as like a study on, like, it was a simple process, cookie making, versus one as complex as this. So thanks for the refresher, and it makes me feel horrible that I didn't retain that. So how do you guys attack this massive, really hugely integrated, we'll call it a problem, right, to create efficiency so that the AI or the robots are keeping that goal in mind rather than only the one task and how it is integrated across all of the broader ecosystem?
Yeah, really good question, right? And so when I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we're AI-enabled orchestration. It's a easy to kind of digest term to say what that means under the hood is we've spent 6 years building a huge amount of domain expertise on being able to build and design this mathematical model that can represent any warehouse. So the term digital twin is often thrown around and companies talk about wanting it, but what we've actually built inside of AutoScheduler, our platform builds an operational twin of any warehouse, which is going to be unique. It's not something you can get out of your warehouse management system or your warehouse execution system. And that operational twin is able to build out and map out every single flow that needs to occur in the facility, understand the objectives of the facility, right? So how willing to make something late are you if it means that you get one more order on that particular truck, right? Those are trade-offs people have to actually think through and make. You can establish and kind of create all of that inside of our platform. It is able to then mathematically reason through it and give you the plan that says, here's exactly how everything needs to flow. Here's how you're going to be leveraging your workforce, your people. Here's what your automation is going to be doing. Here's how that's going to change. And then as soon as any condition changes, so automation goes down, a truck doesn't show up, people call in sick because the Super Bowl was the night before, it's able to then readapt that plan and continuously provide feedback on the best possible way to run the operation and integrate with that with systems that already exist so that you can control execution more smoothly on the floor.
Yeah, I imagine those simulations are incredibly valuable, but then it also makes me think, Gartner found that 55% of supply chain leaders are unclear on their AI returns. So does this also help you show those returns and the actual value in your product as you go through and do that?
Very much so, right? One of the big beliefs I have on AI, and I think anybody who's been in supply chain long enough has seen this, is that we have actually built our supply chains to map to the softwares that we use. And that world is changing. And with AI and showing these returns and being able to say operationally, here's what I saved in operation, I can show you that your pick density has gone up by 25%, which means that your labor requirements has gone down by this much, your automation utilization has gone up by this much. Being able to do all of those things means that supply chains, and I can speak specifically for the warehouses, are in a position to say, we're going to map our software to fit our supply chain so that we're hitting the business objectives we need with the systems we have in place to better control overall flow through the network, not just the node.
So I spoke earlier this year at an event about AI and supply chain, and I think that obviously we talk about AI on the show all of the time, and brokers are certainly using it, whether it be agents or whether it be in their workflow. But I was really shocked that in this room full of shippers and manufacturers, no one raised their hand in talking about how they're using AI in their daily lives. And I know we're seeing people like FedEx use physical AI. Why is it not spreading more quickly in our industry? What are those constraints, to use a word you used earlier?
Yeah, so I think AI has been a very top-down mandate so far for a lot of organizations, which doesn't always work. And so actually, I just put an article out about this specifically, in that with AI, every individual needs to find a eureka moment. So the eureka moment referencing Archimedes and his eureka moment, in that once you actually start using it, so I don't know if you guys use Claude, Gemini, Grok.
We are extensive
yes.
users of AI here. I mean, it has been so instrumental in our work. Go ahead.
But same, right? I can't think of functioning without it, because it's my background and I crossed this bridge a long time ago, but not everybody's there. And we have to understand that in order to actually impact AI adoption across an enterprise, every individual needs to have a eureka moment on how they can use that. And it is just iteration, training, giving them the tool sets to build and the capabilities to do so. And that's a very different skill set than what a lot of people operating
Keith,
in supply chain has today.
It strikes me, I mean, this has been something that's plagued supply chain technology businesses for, well, since they began, really, is that supply chain is really a back office function, or I think the best description was Jet McCandless, who was a founder of Project 44, years ago, gave the description of Homer Simpson. When he blew up the nuclear plant, he got sent to the shipping department, and it was sort of like, the way that that was portrayed on TV was like, hey, if you mess up, you get sent to logistics. My read on it is the reason, to Julie's point about AI really hasn't made it into supply chain is because most of your IT budgets go to things that are sexier. And we know this looking even at like the freight data business, is that like we've been able to demonstrate significant savings on supply chain and logistics costs. And companies are like, look, it just isn't a priority for us.
Well, what about just manufacturing efficiency though? Like outside of supply chain, but automating and using AI and though, like.
I mean, look, definitely, but Keith, I mean, is it a matter that really, that this is oftentimes because of the lack of sort of CFO level attention that supply chains have historically gotten is one of the reasons we're not seeing faster movement?
This is a whole thesis that could be written for hours, and I'll try to give you like a 30-second answer on it, which is supply chain has historically been viewed as a cost center, not a value driver, right? Big companies like Walmart and Amazon realized that wasn't the case. Look how they're doing, right? However, very few people, so mechanical engineer by training, I don't know many mechanical engineers that are now in supply chain, right? If you grew up and you were a software developer, or you were building AI models and getting a PhD in it, it is very unlikely that you said, you know what I want to do is I want to go into warehousing or transportation, because there you could go work for Google or you could work for Microsoft. And that narrative of supply chain not being the sexiest draw or the boardroom conversation changed dramatically over the last 6 years, right? And so I would argue now it's certainly in boardroom conversations. It is certainly at the CIO, CEO, CSCO level. But it takes time to take for that level of adoption or that level of visibility to trickle down to everybody inside of an entity. So when we talk about AI adoption across supply chains, it's not just an executive saying it needs to happen. It is the workforce that drives 10% of United States GDP that has to actually pick it up, use it, understand it. And that takes time.
I think the biggest issue here, the fundamental problem, and we saw this during pre-COVID, but certainly during COVID and then after COVID, is that the people that are making the decisions in terms of budget allocation and projects oftentimes don't understand supply chain. They just don't get it. I mean, this is something that we continue to see when we talk to companies, is that oftentimes they are challenged. I mean, before COVID, the CEOs of many manufacturers didn't even realize the name of the person that ran their supply chain, much less have their pulse on what's happening. And I think this is part of the problem in terms of budget allocation, is that when you're focused on AI projects, you focus on the stuff that you understand intimately because you can sort of force those issues. Marketing, sales, that's the sexy stuff that gets it. Maybe it's billing and collections, because CFOs love to focus on that type of stuff. Whereas the supply chains parts of their business are often misunderstood and underappreciated.
I also think there's a bit of supply chain professionals, procurement managers are all by nature risk adverse.
That's true.
And
I mean,
they look
you get
at
fired,
AI
right? By
as
screwing it up.
Yeah, they look at AI as a risk instead of a benefit until it's been proven.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
That's changing though. So I will say that we're seeing that change when you're able to actually give companies the tool sets they need to build what they want with AI, and less about here's my platform, take it or leave it, which has been supply chain software for the last 20 years. Right? When you're able to actually go and say, we are a partner that helps you build the things you need to run your supply chain. Yes, we leverage AI to do that, but at the end of the day, you get something that is deterministic, safe, operable, and perfectly fits your business. That narrative comes across as much more genuine, and people are far more willing to listen to that particular story than historically. And I don't think Technology wasn't in a place to do that 6 months ago, much less 6 years ago. But that you can now. You can have that conversation. You can deliver that meaningfully and quickly. And so I think over the next 12 months, you'll see quite a bit of shift in the mindset.
So for someone who is embracing robotics and AI to a certain extent, right, and maybe has tasks automated but no orchestration layer, what's the first step?
First step, document your process. Everybody talks about data with AI. Very few companies actually document the decision-making processes that then are applied to that data to actually run the supply chain. So get your data, understand at least what you have, document the processes on how people are making decisions today, at which point then you are ready for orchestration and AI enablement, because you can start to take the low-hanging fruit of those decisions and start to automate them and step your way up.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Keith. We will be watching to see how you guys continue to grow. We are going to take a quick break, and then when we get back, we'll dive into the Sonar data.
Every load you move depends on one thing, knowing who's on the other side. And Highway gives freight brokers the carrier identity tools to verify carriers, secure the load, and book with confidence. The performance guarantee puts up $100,000 behind that promise. Real money behind the standard. No other freight technology company has made that commitment. This is, again, Highway, the standard for carrier identity.
The world doesn't wait. So neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
Once a year, the entire freight industry stops what it's doing and comes to one place, Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is F3, the Future of Freight Festival. It isn't just a conference. It's the largest festival in freight, built to pull you all the way in. The energy, the ideas, the atmosphere, and the people who move this industry forward. Over 50 speakers, 4 events across 3 days, founders, executives, innovators, and disruptors, all under one roof, all asking the same question: what comes next? On the main stage, the sharpest minds in freight take on the biggest questions in the business, the trends, the technology, and the forces shaping what's ahead. Then the clock starts, 7 minutes, no exceptions. The cutting edge of freight tech goes head to head, live, battling for best in show. When the time's up, the lights go out. And in between, the conversations that don't happen anywhere else, the connections that change the trajectory of your business, the relationships you'll carry long after you leave. Because when the sessions end, the festival begins. Live entertainment, unforgettable experiences, a celebration of the world of freight, and an energy you won't find at any other event in the industry. The leaders you need, the access you won't get anywhere else. This is where knowledge is shared, where deals get done, where the future of freight gets decided. F3, Future of Freight Festival, October 27th and 28th. The Signal, Chattanooga, Tennessee. We'll see you there. Register now at live.freightwaves.com.
So welcome back to FreightWaves Today. It is Sonar Update. Julie, what are we looking at right here? It looks like volumes are on deck.
Yeah, so I thought we would go ahead and compare. Volumes are really leveling out, and you can see that this year that we had a little bit of a hike, and then they began to fall.
It was a lot. If you're especially trying to find capacity, it was a hike.
And then now we're seeing them really level out and stay closer to 2023. Yeah, we lost.
So let's just talk about this. This is 2035, which is the year over year. This would be 24 and 23.
Yep.
So really, a couple of years you're looking at really some slowdown that happens typically in that July, August period. You do see it drop. It dropped again this year in July, like normal. It's normal seasonality.
Very typical seasonality.
I think there's been some concern about whether this slowdown that we've seen this year is something more concerning. But this follows a very seasonal pattern. You can see it here. Now, maybe the significant increase that we saw was abnormal to seasonality. And that's what drove some bias that I including us, thought this would continue. It didn't continue. We saw it drop, sort of reset back, but still above last year's tender volume. And look, what's nice about this is that this data, if you look at seasonal, predicts that even in the softest year, if we go back to 2023, you could see that basically even in the softest of years, we do see increases going into Labor Day. And this is right at the period where Labor Day starts to really be top of mind. This year is a later Labor Day, which is probably why it's not started early, like it's a week later than normal, or has been the last couple of years. So we're going to start to see that pick up, really headed in, and this big drop that you see is Labor Day.
Yep, and we will, and then coming out of Labor Day is when we'll
see a big surge. You see it after, by the way, you see this right after Memorial Day as well.
Yes.
A significant surge, it pops, just a lot of leftover orders.
Yeah, this was coming out of Labor Day.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting.
Memorial Day.
Looking at how significant the drop was back in 2000 like last year versus this year. By the way, this is a data anomaly. It was a data feed problem. We have a rule of not overriding old data. So that is an anomaly that you should just completely ignore in 2023. It was a data anomaly, been fixed. But really what we're looking at here is the fact that last year we saw this significant trough during peak. October was weak. We saw it, as we've covered extensively. November was when the freight recession feels like everyone was sort of declaring it over, the Great Freight Recession. And that's when the market recovered. I think this year what we're going to see is much more like we saw back in 2024, stable year. And look, I think because of the things that we've covered extensively is that this peak season probably started earlier, like a lot of freight moving by intermodal, imports came in earlier than we expect. You may not see the big significant surge of freight headed into that October, November season. So it may be more muted than it has been and maybe more disappointing, more stable, which frankly for motor carriers, except if you're operating strictly in the spot market, is better because you have more time to plan.
Yes. So similar story, tender rejections.
13.5%.
Beginning to level out, right? Still obviously significantly higher than prior years, but beginning to level out. And so I wanted to look a little bit further into that and think about tender rejections and kind of found an interesting, as we've talked about tender rejections, there has been mode shift to intermodal. So you can see this is outbound tender container volume. This is domestic intermodal volume, significantly higher than prior years.
And we've covered the intermodal rail, and domestic has been the big winner, but intermodal rail has had its best year on record.
So much mode conversion.
It certainly it continues to increase. But one of the interesting things that we've covered is that a lot of the rail activities on the eastern half of the United States, not just the west. So it's not just the transcontinental freight. A lot of it is in the eastern half of the United States, benefiting from NS and CSX, who've been the big winners. And they're winning a lot of share versus truck because of that 34% discount that intermodal carries versus truck.
That's right. So I wanted to look a little further into average length of haul and how that relates to tender rejections and how that also relates to intermodal volumes, right? So this is, again, the seasonality of the prior 3 years, blue being this year. And overall length of haul has fallen significantly, down to 463 miles. So you can see that we're way down here at this point. The reason that speaks to tender rejections, what we're seeing in the overall market, is that short length of haul freight tends to be accepted. That's generally contracted, it's highly repeatable, using the same carrier, versus that longer length of haul freight tends to have a higher tender rejection average, especially when you get above 800 miles. So, and you can see that in this chart, that the blue line is average length of haul, the yellow is average tender rejections, and they really move in tandem with each other. I mean, you can say there's some times when they tend
to diverge,
but then as we have gotten into this year, February of this year, moving forward, they really have moved pretty closely in line with each other, which makes a lot of sense of why we've also seen that sort of stabilization in tender rejections and them come back down to a more normal place around that 13.5%.
I think is interesting is that one of the things that I think may not be as obvious is that intermodal is taking on longer lengths of haul. With that, the savings are gained so much higher. We didn't plan on this, but yes, that's exactly it, right? Is that intermodal with 34% discounts.
Yep, this is length of haul in blue. This is tender rejections in yellow.
Yep.
And then this is domestic intermodal rail volume in gray.
Look at rail volume, length of haul down. So we're seeing shorter truck routes, because if you're tight on capacity, you can put it on the rail. Plus, when you're dealing with a 34% discount, you want that going over as long of a length of haul as possible. Rail benefits from that, particularly that rail fuel surcharge, which is cheaper than truck fuel surcharges.
And when freight is readily available for carriers, they're making that decision, do I want to be under a load for a whole week? Or do I want to be able to get in more loads per truck per week at a higher rate per mile at that lower length of haul?
And I think shippers are also thinking differently about their routing guides than they have been. They're taking advantage of intermodal. We talked about the fact that this is not an overnight decision. You know, we saw fuel prices really start to pick up in February leading up to the war. We had the war in March, and really what we have seen since then is just continued increase in the crack spread that John Kingston loves to talk about. Is basically diesel prices. The spread is at all-time record highs between what oil would suggest versus diesel. And if you've seen the attacks, I know that we started talking about this, you started to really see these videos on social media, is that refiners are being blown up in Russia, and that is putting an enormous amount of pressure on diesel prices. I don't see that stopping, but there was an interesting post this weekend. They have built this cage around the airport in Dubai, these giant cages, which are collecting drones to prevent basically a drone from attacking the fuel island that's out there.
I saw that, and it was insane and really smart. Okay, so this is imports. Imports are ticking up, but I was going through these because I wanted to actually get to fuel since you brought it up. Spot market conditions. But yes, this is the actual DTS, diesel truck stop, actual price per gallon. And you can see that, you know, obviously we're up almost as high as when the conflict sort of started, and prices went up pretty quickly at that point. So we will continue to watch this as well.
There is no suggestion. In fact, the Trump administration has continued to, last week, talked about this was the tightest set of economic embargo, I think in history was the description they used. But basically a massive set of sanctions that they're going against the Iranian regime. Look, you got to give the Iranian regime a little credit for just saying, hey, we're not going to do anything. And they can hold out for a long time, or I believe they can hold out for a long time. So I don't know if the pressure actually makes a difference. I mean, I think we all thought the war would be one and done. At least I did. I don't know that everyone subscribed to that, but that's clearly not the case. The Iranian regime is holding out, and I don't know that this gets resolved anytime soon. But I think the more interesting side of the story is what's happening in Russia, is that a lot of the diesel concerns that we've heard from multiple guests on FreightWaves today is related to the Russian refinery activity, not what's happening in the Middle East.
That's right.
It's the diesel products, and you see these long lines, you can see these videos in Russia where it's just line after line taking hours to get fuel. And diesel is, you know, certainly being impacted by the lack of refinery capacity. And look, the Ukrainians are, you know, if anything, they're ruthless when it comes to taking out Russian infrastructure. And energy is the primary cash cow of the Russian empire. So if you want to destroy the Russian economy, which Ukraine is definitely trying to do, you take out the energy infrastructure, which they are, you know, that's part of their goal. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of relief. And I've been wrong about this. A month ago, Matt Leffler brought it up. I think he was talking specifically about Hormuz. I think Russia's off so many people's radar because I think Americans have a tendency to drown out conflicts
Well, it's
that
been
don't
going
involve
on,
us.
well, and it's been going on so
It's
long.
been going on
People
since
just
2022.
get,
We're over 4.5 years into this, and it just feels like a little bit of a stalemate if you sort of take the news. But the Ukrainians are continuing to just take drones, civilian drones, and attack infrastructure. And so I don't get the sense that this is going to resolve itself anytime soon. And I think the pressure on civilian infrastructure and supply chains is going to be more and more significant. It's going to put more pressure on the diesel price.
I agree. I think the only other thing that we wanted to talk about was that you and I have this continued conversation and debate sometimes with others that fuel cost is not always going to be reflected in spot rates. So this is
But they're
comparing.
diverging. Like
This
they're
is
two different
comparing
data points.
MTI is spot.
Yep.
This is DTS, diesel fuel price. And I think a lot of the things.
We had a guest that was talking about this last week.
And that the cost, the rates go up when the cost of fuel goes up and they come down, but they
diverge.
just don't. They are based on supply and demand and what the market will bear at the moment.
There's a clearing price in freight that's set by supply and demand. And then it was at the Hall of Fame, by the way, I just remembered it. It was
Overdrive.
Yes, Overdrive. The VP of Overdrive, Director of Business Development, talked about this, is how they're diverged, which is exactly what the data says. You see this fuel price increase. Now, one is diesel price per gallon and one is price per mile.
Right.
But the important thing isn't the actual numbers, it's the direction of the charts.
Right.
What you've seen this year is that, yes, diesel moved up, took a bit for spot rates to move up with it. If you look at it, much greater move. This moved up. But then we saw some resolution,
fell.
and
Right.
look, I think this is the telling answer, is that we've seen diesel since early July continue to go up, and we've seen spot rates go down. Proof that there is a disconnection between the two data points. Now, what's interesting about it is that this is retail diesel, as we've talked about on the show. A very small percent of motor carriers are paying retail prices for diesel, so it isn't. But the fuel surcharge is in that number, so shippers are getting hit from higher diesel prices.
Yep. Yeah, I just thought this was an interesting point to ensure that all of our viewers are remembering that this is really about what the market will bear and available capacity.
Freight rates are not the
about
same
cost.
thing as diesel price.
Yep, exactly. That's your Sonar Update for today. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
In today's freight environment, every second of uptime matters. Of course, maintenance is inevitable, but large fleets cannot succeed on reactive fixes alone. That's why Love's Truck Care delivers smarter preventative maintenance. Love's understands that operational pressures demand a nationwide service network for better visibility, actionable intelligence, and consistent execution, all of which you protect your assets, reduce your total cost of ownership, and maximize your uptime. Maintenance is, of course, inevitable, but large fleets cannot succeed on reactive fixes alone. That's why Love's Truck Care delivers smarter preventative maintenance. Learn more.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me, and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited, and I hope to see you in class.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. You know, Julie, speaking of drones, because we're talking about these drone attacks, something more interesting in the drone world, which is good news, and as a pilot, someone who loves aviation, is always tuned into the aviation innovations. I don't think there's a better story than drone delivery. I cannot wait to get my $28 burrito delivered by drone, but today, I'm just going to have to get my batteries from Amazon when I need them at the last minute. And to talk about that, we have Eric Kulisch, our air cargo reporter. Eric, are you going to be reporting on drone delivery going forward? Is this part of the drone coverage that you're going to be into?
I mean, you know, we cover parcel industry and e-commerce, and that's increasingly becoming part of it. If it's coming last mile, and it might not be coming by a van anymore, it might be coming by a drone, so we have to cover it.
Okay, so let's talk about Amazon is rapidly expanding their drone delivery programs. You know, they've been testing this, I think all the way back to when FreightWaves was first started in 2017. We first started writing, Brian Strait started first writing articles. I believe we were covering this. I can remember back to the earliest days when we started. There was like these patents of drone delivery and some early tests. Zipline was doing some stuff around the world. Drone delivery was not legal by FAA standards up until the last couple of years where they standardized it. But they have been testing this for some time in certain cities. I know DFW has been one of those cities, Northwest Arkansas, where Walmart has been based. Obviously, I don't think it was Amazon. I think it was Walmart doing it. But tell us a little bit about what this drone delivery is all about.
Yeah, you're right, Craig. You know, Jeff Bezos at Amazon announced went on 60 Minutes in 2013 and announced we're going to have this prime air drone delivery, and he made it sound like it was going to happen pretty soon. But it's taken about 13 years. They've been pilot testing it, as you said. I think they used to have, you know, the variant that you're showing there in some of the video is a 6-rotor helicopter or drone copter. The previous version was an octocopter, so they've had some different variants that they've tested. And, you know, the regulations still aren't, the FAA regulations still aren't firm. We're still waiting for the beyond visual line of sight rules to come out that will kind of standardize across the board how drone operators can function in conjunction with regular aircraft and all the safety regulations that they need. And, you know, I'm anticipating that in the next few weeks. So it could come soon. But right now, people like Amazon are kind of operating with these partial waivers. You have to get a waiver to operate. You know, normally the drone operator has to be able to see the drone that they put in the air with certain waivers. If you you know, demonstrate certain level of proficiency, you can get this waiver for beyond visual line of sight. But that is difficult to scale up. There's technical problems. You have to request it for each location. It takes time. So it'll be a lot better when we have these standard rules. And I think that's maybe why Amazon's announcing this, because maybe the dam will break and they can roll it out to more cities.
So I'm going to talk real quick. Sorry, Julie. Cool. But I want to go through the list here on what states are going to get this first, because I think it's interesting, and I have a theory, but I'd love to get your take on it. So the current states are Arizona, Florida, Kansas, Louisiana, Michigan, Nebraska, and Texas. This is according to Grok, Eric. I'm sure it's probably reading your comments, but this is actually, it looks like it's coming off of Amazon's own announcements. They've mentioned specifically Chicago, Syracuse, which is New York, Cleveland, Atlanta, and Boise metro areas are coming, but Tennessee is not on the list. What is there a reason for that? Because obviously we care about stuff that happens in Tennessee, Eric.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what their, criteria are for the, which order the rollout will take place. Maybe it's market demand, maybe it's technical requirements. I know you have to work. I know they were supposed to be actually in Memphis, Tennessee, earlier this year, and it's been delayed. I know they've had to work through the local airport authority, the local city planning commission, and there have been some delays in that process. I'm not sure all the particulars, but I think it's, kind of having certain safety agreements and so forth in place. So I think some of these things just take time to work out, and the ones that get done quicker, maybe that's where they roll out first.
Yeah, so I guess question for both of you. What I'm wondering is it just all of this regulation and that it's new for it to take so long for the
Yeah,
because been talking about forever. I remember many years ago, earlier in my career, listening to a keynote from Zipline about delivering blood, like donation blood for remote medical facilities.
Well, they were doing it in Africa, and I think in Alaska, because they stayed out of the FAA. Alaska has it's basically an entirely different regulated air. As a pilot, Alaska has its own set of rules, which tend to be more forgiving for pilots than you get because there's more per capita.
So many small planes and so many.
Well, it's more. There's the most per capita airplanes in the world is out of Alaska, and because there's parts of Alaska which are completely just not even monitored, it's got its own set of rules as a pilot. But the Zipline was doing Africa, frankly, because they couldn't come to the United States because the FAA had banned them. These rules were not in place. It's one of these things with.
Well, how high do drones fly?
Well, I think that's interesting, Eric. How high are we going to see our flying boxes?
Amazon says their MK30 drone goes about 200 to 300 feet. Some of the other, there's middle mile. There's companies that are trying to develop more middle mile, heavier cargo drones, and they would fly much higher. But, for these small home delivery drones, they're 300 feet maybe is the ceiling.
By the way, I got to ask, I'm going to nerd out airplane talk, pilot talk. Are these, do you know if they have ADS-B? Are they showing up on scopes? So if I was a pilot, am I going to run into one? Am I going to see it?
That's a good question. I know Amazon promotes the fact that they have a detect and avoid technology, so I think that's what you're referring to. And I think
I'm not worried about it avoiding me. I'm worried about me avoiding it. Is really what I'm worried about. So,
right. Well, I think the BVLOS, the Beyond Visual Line, the Part 108 rules that will come out soon, are going to require that the drone has an identification signal that it puts out its position so you can avoid it.
Yeah, the ADS-B is what we use as airspace. That's how you can track, Taylor Swift's airplane. But it's also as a pilot, it's how I know that there are aircraft around me through my, my Garmin is the other aircraft are sending signals. It's not, by the way, it's interesting because the radar that's inside of air traffic control is different than what ADS-B is built to do. ADS-B essentially allows airplanes to talk to one another. So when I'm flying, the other airplanes know that I'm in the air. It's communicating my altitude, it's communicating my speed and location to the other airplanes. It's the same thing. And I just, as a pilot, as I fly, I'd like to know that these drones are around me because I want to avoid them at all cost.
Yeah, the new rules that'll, require, I'm sure if you got a waiver, you have to have this, but the new rules the standardized rules that are coming out, drones will have to broadcast their identity and location at all times when they're operating, and then they have to yield the right of way to crewed aircraft that are broadcasting ADS-B.
Yeah, I think that's important because without it, you just, like I said, these things, I've flown into a bird, I've had a bird strike. There have been pilots I've known that have gotten killed because of a bird strike. So, you're flying low. It's scary when you think about the fact that these things can come out of nowhere if you don't see them.
But to Julie's point, I think, drones have been in the news for a long time. They're making deliveries, but you haven't seen them on scale. A Wing or Alphabet's Wing drone or Zipline. They might have these one-off doing some blood delivery, like you said, to a hospital on a specific route. Or from certain locations, from a CVS to your home, but it's very limited. And I think that's just partly because of the rules. And, I think the door will open, the floodgates will open more once these rules are passed. And you can kind of, if you have the technology, you can start, spreading out the program.
So Eric, according to Grok, it monitors ADS-B. It has sensors to monitor my location, but it does not actually broadcast it. Maybe that's better because maybe it knows what to do and I don't. With birds, they're always one of those things where you're flying around, you see a bird and you're trained to go up because birds dive when they get near it. So maybe this is the same thing with these drones, is they'll dip. I got to tell you, it makes me a bit nervous as a pilot to know that I'm sharing the skies with these things. Although I'm as a supply chain person, I think this is cool technology.
Super cool.
And I cannot wait to get burritos delivered by drone.
Everything. I can't wait to get anything.
Well, I live in the country. I live on the side of a mountain.
Yeah, so it's way faster.
Well, the issue is when we order something, it takes anywhere from an hour, 20 minutes at the shortest to an hour to get food delivery and, stuff delivered to my house.
Yeah.
Because we just live so far away, this is the perfect way to get things delivered.
And as traffic has gotten worse here, even for us, and we're not, it is taking significantly more time to get things delivered because of those.
That's true.
So I guess that leads me to my next question, Eric. So how is this, I guess, first of all, if these are small things, under 5 pounds, how much of actual order volume for someone like Amazon does that cover? And then how are consumers looking at this? Is it going to be kind of like Prime Now, or when you pay for the 1 hour delivery for Walmart Plus? How is it fitting into the marketplace?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I guess where the drone delivery is rolled out, when you shop online, you have that option to check if you want a drone delivery, right? So just like you can put in for regular 2-day or if you want to pay extra for fast same-day delivery on the ground, you can check off for a drone. So assuming the weather's okay, they'll deliver it by drone. And, it's just to meet Amazon. You're seeing even Home Depot just announced express delivery from stores. Walmart's really going into from store ultra fast delivery. And it's just this thought that there's an expectation of consumer demand for fast delivery. Although Prime, with these drone shipments by Amazon, it's going to require, you have to pay. I think if you're over $50 worth, then it's free. But under that, you'll pay like $3 to get a drone delivery. I should say these drone deliveries seem to be working pretty well. Amazon, the drone will come and then they drop it from about 13 feet above out of a chute. And it drops down. Seems to be working pretty well, but it's not foolproof. We just saw someone in Houston, the drone came and dropped it into their pool, not on the ground. So
I saw that.
Yeah,
Eric,
go
ahead.
Yeah, and that's about it.
Look, this is a really exciting time. And of course, I'm closer probably to the urban air mobility movement than most because of my aviation background. We've been covering it. I know, Eric, you've been following it closely. We have a full-time writer that's been covering air mobility. He does it also for FreightWaves. One of the interesting things is what urban air mobility is going to represent. This is astounding numbers. Morgan Stanley years ago put out a white paper talking about the size of urban air mobility. I want to put this in perspective, that the trucking industry is about $1 trillion industry in the United States. Now, Morgan Stanley predicted, this is in 2021, that urban air mobility drones, which also includes people like eVTOLs, Joby, things like that, where we're going to get not just packages, but we will climb in an air taxi is going to be a $1 trillion industry equivalent by 2040, will be the equivalent of the US trucking industry today in terms of size. And look, there are so many cool things happening. I mean, this is like 14 years away. This is the flying taxi but imagine what this does, Julie. Like, we're talking about air delivery, but the other thing so I live 12 miles from the city to the office in the country. I live almost, it feels like I'm going to live in a different state because it's in sort of the remote part of on a mountain. But I think with air mobility is if you can, and you saw this during COVID, as people can live further and further out, when you can get conveniences of products and your own travel into the city, is it opens up really real estate further and further out, becomes more attractive. Because why wouldn't you want to live on the land if you could get the modern conveniences? Now, my wife complains about all the errands she's got to drive up and down the mountain, but I think this is one of the great things that's going to reshape cities entirely. Because once you know you don't have to, and look, we saw it during COVID. People are living further and further away because of Zoom, this urban air mobility. Now, here's the astounding fact, to pile on Morgan Stanley's prediction, is that we're talking $9 trillion by 2050. That is the equivalent of the entire logistics industry today. That's what Morgan Stanley predicted. It says that the bear case is $2.3 trillion. The base case is $9 trillion, approximately the size of logistics, and bull case is $19 trillion. Now, these numbers sound absolutely astounding, and they are. But I want to remind you, if you go back to 2008, we didn't even think about Uber. Like Uber is now arguably one of the most successful transportation companies ever created. And it's not weird for us to have a burrito delivered by a car, nor is it weird to have your packages delivered by Amazon or you to pile in some dude's random Kia. Like, that's all within the last 15 years. And so I mean, Eric, you've been following these stories. Like, this is going to happen whether we like it or not, right?
It's coming. Yep.
We should do a whole day on urban air mobility.
Yeah, but I will tell you, the first time that a package gets delivered to our house via drone, first of all, my kids will freak out and think it's the coolest thing they've ever seen.
Of course they will.
Second of all, my dogs will freak out the opposite way. It'd be absolutely terrified of whatever this is embarking.
Something's dropping from the sky.
Yes.
Oh, powerful one dropped a package in there.
And like all to keep them from getting into whatever is.
All the dogs will think about is food.
No, that's what I'm saying. Ours, like, if they're on our front porch, they sometimes don't go through the packages, depending on what it is.
Oh,
but if it's just out in the front yard, like, you know how much mail has gotten eaten? Yes, boxes. So if it's just dropped in our front yard,
the problem is the puppy will hear it.
Yes.
And go out there to tear into my packages.
Yes.
It is interesting, but I think one of the coolest things on urban air mobility, like, it's the idea of getting yourself into one of these Jobies, what they call eVTOLs, electric vertical takeoff or landing, is that there's people conceptualizing building hotels and resorts, no roads, into the Amazon jungle. Like, imagine what you can do when you're no longer defined by getting a car up and down a place.
Yeah, or the cost of a helicopter, like, a helicopter.
You can go anywhere. Like, that's what makes this stuff so exciting.
Hey, look, I'll reach out to Amazon and make sure, Chattanooga gets to the front of the list.
Add them to the front of the list. I'm going to we're going to do the delivery. They are opening up a new delivery location not too far from me in a town called Lookout Valley, which is really where I live, and hopefully there'll be drone delivery there. I imagine as they're building new distribution centers, they're definitely thinking about it. And frankly, because we live on the west side of town, further out in the mountains, which is where the mountains start, really, as you go, anyone who's driving trucks knows Mount Eagle, it's really where that whole range of mountains start. Frankly, drone delivery makes sense because the houses are further and further out. The country is further and further out.
And the terrain is hard to drive through. I mean,
the range right now of these drone deliveries with Amazon, it's about 7.5 miles from a fulfillment center. So
I'm too far from the current fulfillment center. I know this by the way the crow flies because I've actually measured it. Because I've looked at every kind of aviation technology that you could find out there, and I'm like, can I go? Have you seen it's the Jetson 1? Have you seen this thing, Eric? It's like a self-flying. A drone, have you seen it?
No, but I can imagine it.
It's a seat with basically propellers.
You're trying to figure out how to get
Yeah.
yourself to work in a drone?
Well, that would be cool, but I was actually trying to figure out how to fly from my house to the small airport where I keep my airplanes. That way I could just go to go. Because it takes me about 40 minutes,
First
and I
world
thought this would be
problems,
great. The
First
problem
world-
is the
first
battery
world
wouldn't
problems.
last long enough, so. Anyways, well, Eric, really appreciate you coming in. We got to follow this urban air mobility. The numbers are astounding, but the life-changing impact on aviation technology is coming. Flying drones are coming, and flying taxis. The Jetsons were right. We'll be right back.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
Once a year, the entire freight industry stops what it's doing and comes to one place, Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is F3, the Future of Freight Festival. It isn't just a conference. It's the largest festival in freight, built to pull you all the way in. The energy, the ideas, the atmosphere, and the people who move this industry forward. Over 50 speakers, 4 events across 3 days, founders, executives, innovators, and disruptors, all under one roof, all asking the same question: what comes next? On the main stage, the sharpest minds in freight take on the biggest questions in the business, the trends, the technology, and the forces shaping what's ahead. Then the clock starts, 7 minutes, no exceptions. The cutting edge of freight tech goes head to head, live, battling for best in show. When the time's up, the lights go out. And in between, the conversations that don't happen anywhere else, the connections that change the trajectory of your business, the relationships you'll carry long after you leave. Because when the sessions end, the festival begins. Live entertainment, unforgettable experiences, a celebration of the world of freight, and an energy you won't find at any other event in the industry. The leaders you need, the access you won't get anywhere else. This is where knowledge is shared, where deals get done, where the future of freight gets decided. F3, Future of Freight Festival, October 27th and 28th. The Signal, Chattanooga, Tennessee. We'll see you there. Register now at live.freightwaves.com.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. It is Monday, and we are rocking and rolling to another great week, headed right into college football start week. We love that. Also, we're just 2 weeks out of Labor Day. Can you believe it?
I really can't. And Labor Day is late, right?
I know.
So
I keep thinking, man, it's Labor Day time this weekend, but I have to remind myself we have one more week. Lots of more time for the freight market to ramp.
squeeze in a few more visits to the pool with my kids.
Yeah?
I need to before
Before it closes? Does it close on Labor Day?
Yeah, the hours
the
get
last
less
hurrah.
because there's the lifeguards are in school and back in college and all of
Yeah,
that.
they got. I think the same thing is at our pool. So yeah, actually, you know what's interesting? My wife took them to the pool so much. She says it so they won't destroy the house, but she took them to the pool so much that they have actually stopped. They don't want to go. They almost feel
we
they're.
didn't have that much time this summer, so that's why I feel like we got.
Did you do the same thing?
We didn't go,
Did your
and
kids?
nearly
Oh.
enough. So
My
I feel
kids
like we
were.
gotta squeeze in a couple more, but and then we can really lean into fall.
My kids are raisins because they're at the pool so often. But look, our next guest, friend of the show, a friend of the family, Russell Jones, is the CEO of Private Fleet Net Zero. Russell, I've known Russell for many years. Russell, welcome to FreightWaves Today. Good to see you.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me on your popular and informative show.
Well, we really enjoy it. You're always a high energy guy, lots of thought. I got to ask though, Russell, we're going to talk about private fleet, but I got to ask about Cargo Chief. Where are we at in the cycle of that business?
So Cargo Chief is surging very nicely. The markets are tight for getting capacity for a bunch of reasons. We'll talk about that some today. Cargo Chief is continuing to grow. Over 1,000 buyers, approaching $10 billion to spend on that platform. So they're doing well. They're helping, brokers buy for hire capacity, and helping the SMB brokers really is their target.
Now, are you still involved?
I'm no longer involved. I stepped off. I stopped being the CEO a couple years ago, and then stepped off the board in January. I'm totally focused on Private Fleet Net Zero. I believe it's the best opportunity in my career. I'm super excited about it.
Well, let's hear about it. What you got? What do you got for us, Russell?
Well, so first, think about all the private fleets and and the pressures of costs that they have right now. Fuel surging, you have maintenance going up, insurance is going up, and driver pay is going up as well. And so these drivers, Walmart reports, people are getting paid $100,000 a year to be a Walmart driver. So these private fleets have significant costs, and they're trying to offset those costs. And what Private Fleet Net Zero does at a very high level is we help buyers of truckload capacity find private fleet backhaul capacity. This is really like Match.com for private fleet backhaul capacity. And just to frame this a little bit, private fleets are something like 45% of all the trucks on the highway, and they're empty something like 50 to 90% of their backhauls. So we're talking about over $100 billion worth of truckload capacity that's visible driving down the highway, but it's unused. And really, for the first time, Private Fleet Net Zero is unlocking this capacity for everyone. And there's kind of if you will, and you've reported about this a lot, Craig, on the perfect storm facing freight brokers, right? They have the nuclear verdict, the Montgomery verdict, $500 million. This has, any broker worried about who they have. There was a report just came out on Friday about ILG Logistics reduced their carrier count by 50% because they want to be clean. So they reduced the likelihood of a nuclear verdict. And the National Crime Bureau is saying that there's now, freight theft is at a record high, growing. Fraud, the chameleon carrier story is such a big deal. It is featured on 60 Minutes. And these brokers don't have unlimited IT resources. They don't have resources to go out and do hundreds of integrations. So there's a whole market shift. For decades, it used to be, I want to know about the cheapest truck. Where can I find the cheapest truck? And now it's all about, I need defensible capacity. That's what my clients want. That's what I want as a broker.
Well, private fleets have an advantage, as I think you have talked about the fact that private fleets, we're not the ones hiring a lot of the non-domiciled drivers. I mean, these private fleets are part of typically much bigger organizations that do something other than trucking. And therefore, staying compliant has always been important because they are typically, because if they're big enough, they're on the radar of the government, the state governments, the federal government, and therefore weren't taking some of the same advantages of the rules to the degree that some of the other bad actors were in the for-hire market.
And there's a spotlight on them in the court of public opinion.
Of course they do.
Got the name of their company, the logo on the side of the truck or on the trailer, and certainly don't want that ending up in the news either.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
Julie, you're so right. You think about a typical private fleet like Sherwin-Williams or U.S. Foods, they're unlikely to have English language proficiency issues with their drivers, right? They're going to have lots of maintenance, manuals, procedures, newer trucks, better paid drivers. So the level of service is going to be much better. They're likely to have, they're going to have their insurance. It's not going to get canceled. They're going to have plenty of insurance, right? They're going to have newer trucks. And the National Private Truck Council says that they're in a third less accidents. So the first win for a freight broker is that private fleet capacity is far higher level of service, and their customers are going to like that as well. Secondly, and this is from hundreds of conversations I've had because I've been focused on this for years, is private fleets are going to haul that freight for average discount 25%. That's huge for a freight broker. You think about today's freight broker, by the time they've paid for the truck, they've paid their team's salaries, their team's commissions, and all the utilities and the rent and everything, they might make 2 or 3% EBITDA margins. So now, if they work with private fleets, they're going to, quintuple, quadruple their margins, and that's huge for any broker of any size.
All right, so Russell, let's just talk about some elements here. Load board, when I read this, of course, everyone, hammer, nail, that's instantly what we think about. And we're talking about load matching, instantly comes to mind a load board. Is that a fair description of the business?
We see it differently. When I see that a load board is a carrier said, hey, I have an empty truck in San Diego and needs to get back to Dallas. Private fleets don't want to expose where their trucks are. So how we work with at Private Fleet Net Zero is we really do digital freight matching. So it's where the carrier tells us what lanes they have. They can tell us that in a number of different ways. We have an AI bot that digesting that. We accept static lanes. We accept dynamic lanes. That comes in, that goes into our database of over 40,000 lanes with we have like over 80,000 trucks on the platform. And then the broker sends us loads electronically, and then we have 17 points of matching. This is like digital freight matching on steroids. And when we talk with the buyers, they recognize that digital freight matching will do probably 100% more matching than a human could because there's so much data and so many things to consider. It's just not possible to do it any other way, and that's gone into some of our patent pending technology. And so we bring that all together, and then we generate the matches to the fleets. And when the fleet accepts or counters is the very first time that a private fleet lane is exposed to one of our buyers, one of our brokers. And so it's very private. This is the opposite of a popular load board, and that's the way the private fleets want it.
So Russell, you mentioned load matching. We saw over the last decade, a lot of freight brokers created their own matching technology. But just to make sure our audience is clear on this, you're not a broker, you're simply a matching platform. Is that the best way to think of it?
Craig, thank you for that clarification. It's the key. We are not a broker in any way. Think of us as Match.com. We're a source of capacity, and this is really untapped capacity. We're over $100 billion of capacity that's higher quality and at a discount that will triple the margin for the broker. So we act as an independent source, and the broker does nothing different. Broker's team types into their TMS the loads that are coming in. We receive those loads electronically, and then the broker sits back and waits for accepts, carrier counters, or introductions. We have learned that the private fleets love repetition. They don't really want one load from
Russell, I have a problem with the Match.com analogy because your capacity is married to someone. And married people are not supposed to be on Match.com. It feels more like Airbnb, where they have an excess room, or they're not at home. But the problem with the Match.com analogy is that it's not supposed to be married. These private fleets are married to someone else. They're doing their work.
So I hear you. I appreciate the nuance. It's private fleet backhaul capacity. So if you look at the top,
they're married. They're doing their normal. They have spouses.
We don't want to get anyone in trouble here. So
delivering carpet,
If you look at the top 100 private fleets, 70% of them have a for-hire authority. So they've gone through the drama and the legal work to be all set up to haul someone else's cargo.
I know that. I'm just saying, like the analogy for me that I get my head around, Shaw has a big private fleet. They deliver carpet, and they will deliver the carpet, and if they don't have a backhaul, they'll move it. But that's just, again, the Match.com thing. I'm not going to give it. No one cares about new nuances, but.
Yeah, maybe it would be. Or isn't that also how, Uber got its start, black cars who didn't have backhauls, and then they went into
So anyways, we're getting way off point here. Russell, this show just after a while, like we have crazy thoughts.
Craig and I are spending a little too much time together, I think, these days when we. Anyway, so point being, going back on track here. I think this is a really interesting use case because this is a really tricky, hard problem. And to your earlier point, without digital matching, it is nearly impossible. How do you find that level of repeatability? How do you ensure that it's not going to add additional time for that private fleet who needs to get back to their next load, or frustration for their driver, that the equipment types match, that it's roll doors versus swing doors, or a weight component that private fleet has somehow retrofitted something in their trailer that won't work for this? How do you guys vet all of that and solve this really intricate problem?
So that's a great question. So first, so how we do that is we have, because I've been doing digital freight matching for almost a decade, I feel as though I'm an expert on this, is we have 17 different factors that we look at of what matches capacity to a load. And we put that all out. We do a sprint every 2 weeks. We're constantly updating our web application. And so we have detailed functionality that when we do demos, people are like, oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like this. They really like it a lot. And you think about where we are today as an industry for freight brokers, there's something like 25,000 freight brokers. From my 100 plus conversations with them, my perception is there might be 15 of those that are buying private fleet capacity today in a meaningful volume. And so they're typically doing it manually. So if I work at a freight broker and Shaw sends me their lane list, I'm not going to share that with my coworkers. This is super valuable information. I'm going to hoard that information. When brokers and fleets work with us, we're an open platform. So the lanes come into us on one side, the loads come into the other side, and dispassionately we do all the matches, thousands of matches.
I really like it, Russell. I think what's interesting, you make the case from the fact that this is a matching platform for private fleets exclusively, which has a better safety record. I think your stat here was 25 or 1/3% less accidents. It's 25% cheaper, and arguably it's more secure because the drivers work for the fleet. You know that this fleet, having a private fleet, it takes a lot of resources to manage that private fleet. These guys are typically more loyal. They don't have the turnover problems. Yeah. You know who they are. Frankly, Russell, I think this is a brilliant business model. I don't blame you for doubling down on it.
Well, thank you very much. We're also really excited about the sustainability. Forbes reports that the big trucks out there generate a quarter of the nation's greenhouse gases and over half the deadly fine pollution particulates. And so this is a huge source of carbon problems. And we're on a path, our math is to save literally millions of tons of CO2, the equivalent of 45 million trees. And both carriers and brokers can get behind that because both have some customers that care about that. For those entities that are public, they're reporting out to the SEC. It is a different administration nowadays, but still the SEC is, hey, what are you doing about carbon? How are you helping to decarbonize things? And it's nice to be able to report that out, not only to the government, but also to your customers that care.
Well, larger shippers, particularly those that have global operations, but in Europe, they're required to mention Scope 3. In the U.S., not so much. The SEC during the Biden administration was teasing that. Clearly, we're not headed in that road with the Trump administration. But I think it is an interesting sort of concept to focus specifically on private fleets. I think in a post-Montgomery world, it feels like if I'm a broker, it's a no-brainer to get access to capacity that is off the radar often. And if you mentioned the three things that we've talked about, cheaper rates, safe and secure, I applaud it. I think it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. It's rare that when we do a demo, someone goes, nah, this isn't right for me. We're always, there's something's following up, and we're rapidly growing, within a year of recruiting and starting, the platform being open. We have over 40 buyers, brokers, and over 65 fleets. So that's pretty rapid growth in the hardest year to set up the marketplace. So we expect rapid growth to continue.
Well, Russell, I got to tell you, I didn't know this is the first I've heard of it. Of course, you've probably been posting on LinkedIn. I don't live there. But I'm glad you came in and told us about this. Great to see you. I hope that we'll see you in F3s coming up in October.
Yeah, that would be neat. I'm very excited. At a very high level, the transportation industry has been trying to find the cheapest truck forever. Now it's about I want a safe truck. It's not going to get me into a lawsuit or have my car go all over the highway. And it's basically kind of an unlocked $100 billion worth of trucking capacity. It's just waiting for the brokers' loads. I mean, that's great. I'd love to have people, if they're interested, please come to our website, privatefleetnz.com, and ask for a demo. We'd love to talk with you and learn more.
Well, 45% of the trucking capacity is owned by private fleets, so hopefully you'll help these guys operate more efficiently. Really interesting. Congratulations, Russell. It sounds like a great business model. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about really equipment. We're going to talk about the state of freight. We're going to talk about all the things that are going on right now in the overall market. We have Kirk Mann. He is the head of transportation at Mitsubishi Capital. Stay with us.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me, and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited, and I hope to see you in class.
Welcome back to FreightWaves. Today, we're rolling on. We're going to move into the equipment side of it and the finance side of it with Kirk Mann. He is the head of transportation and vendor solutions at Mitsubishi HC Capital. Welcome. How are you doing, sir?
How are you doing, sir? Thank you, Craig. Doing great. My wife says hello.
Well, tell her, pass it on to from me. How are things going in terms of the market?
It's going good. We certainly saw a significant downturn there for probably 3.5 years. We've seen a supply side recovery with the administration's policy efforts. We've seen some increase in the spot rate. And you pointed out some time ago that freight rejections were high, and that has certainly played in to, I think, the health of the industry over the last 6 months or so. So it's gone much better, I would say.
I mean, I'm sure that's in terms of what you're seeing relative to where we were. Is the capital situation or balance sheets in better shape?
Well, they're certainly going to improve. Would I say that, fiscal year end 25 was fantastic? If you're looking at the publics, maybe. But if you're looking at medium, large fleets, they're tight, but they're not just awful. I mean, they're better than what we would have expected about this time. But we can do better. They can do better, and that's what we're hoping for, is that that will get a supply side. Freight. We need freight demand. We need more freight demand. I think it's coming.
Kirk, you and I met when your wife was at Triumph, and I know she's moved on to other businesses in this industry, serving our industry well, market, helping companies figure out their go-to-market. So let's describe this cycle that we just came from, the Great Freight Recession, compared to other cycles that you've lived through, particularly in the equipment and finance side. Would you describe that as the worst downturn in history, or would you rank it to the financial crisis? How would you compare sort of the significance of it?
Yeah, I think it was the longest for sure. And what made it particularly challenging, I'm afraid to say it was the absolute worst, because you say that, you might get one that is really, really, really bad. It's been tough. It's been very difficult. But the thing that made this one extra difficult was in 21, 22, when you had a ton of demand and people needed equipment. They couldn't get it. So the stuff that you could get was very high. I remember sitting in a conference room. I can't remember what month it was, but and I was talking to our chief risk officer, and I said, well, in your mind, what is a 4-year-old Freightliner Cascadia worth, with less than 500,000 miles? And he said, well, it's about $45,000. I said, what are we financing them at? He said, about 100, 110.
That's crazy.
So
I mean, I remember
we were way bubble. It was an asset bubble of enormous proportions.
I remember watching. We have this data inside of Sonar where pre-COVID prices on equipment that was 5 years old was something like $34,000, and you look at sort of the peak, it got up to $120,000. To your point.
It did.
And it's come back down. But I imagine, how did that, for fleets that may have expanded or entrants that got into the business, have any of them survived, or they've all washed out?
Well, look, Craig, if you look at and this is a commentary about the smaller guys. If you look at the numbers, the average failure rate for anyone that had less than 2 years of experience and they had their ICC motor carrier authority was 85%. The failure rate on average over a 3-year period was 85%. So you can imagine how that reflects in the portfolio of a lender like us that is financing those guys, right? So, we're still here. We're still lending capacity into the marketplace. We didn't leave, but it has not been easy. It's been a big challenge.
And what about a normal cycle? Is that, you talk about 3-year failure rate of 85% during those peak years, but what does a normal cycle look like in terms of failure rate?
Yeah, look, in terms of failure rate, well, that's a good question. Heck, you know what? I'd hate to just lie to you. I think a normal cycle is 12 to 18 months, and I wouldn't think that it would get as high as 85% because it's not lasting as long. But I don't want to quote something that would be inaccurate, but I can tell you over 3 years, on average, the rate was 85%. You guys would know better than me on that, probably.
Yeah. Do you guys foreclose on the equipment? What happens to a fleet that is default? And one of the things I understand that's happened over the last couple of years is that guys just stopped driving. They didn't even bother filing bankruptcy. They just basically would hand the keys back. I'm curious, what does that look like for you guys or just general lenders overall?
Well, look, the first thing we always try to do, and if you go back to 2020, we initiated a customer assistance program back then when COVID hit. And I think we restructured something like 75% of our loans. But 95% of those people began paying again after 90 days. So we gave them a little time to recover, and then they did. They recovered, and of course, you know what happened. I mean, freight demand went through the roof. So I think if you compare 2010, 2016 to 2023, 4, 5. I think that it probably wasn't immeasurably worse. Some people would argue with that, but we get back equipment, and at the end of the day, Craig, we try to work with our customers and keep them on their feet. If that doesn't work and we need to take the equipment back, we do. And we use various methods of distributing that equipment across the spectrum all over the country. Sometimes our dealer helps us. Sometimes we send to auction. Sometimes we take the inventory and we have people on the inside that are selling into the marketplace as that equipment is needed. But as you can imagine, we sat on quite a bit of inventory for quite a long time. It has, thank goodness, deteriorated in a positive way.
But I guess the question, and we've followed this story, when the freight recession really hit, was expectation by so many people, including ourselves, that this recession would wash out a lot of capacity. We didn't see the kinds of expected exits that you would normally see. And we now know the immigration story, the non-domiciled was a big significant contributor to excess capacity. But one of the other things that we tracked down was the amount of stimulus dollars, whether it was PPP loans or one of the ones that didn't get a lot of attention, we covered it, was these SBA loans that were essentially zero cost loans that you didn't have to service for a couple of years. It strikes me that really probably, as you talk about companies remaking payments, probably saved a lot of the capacity that otherwise would have gone out during that really strong downturn.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of it. But on your previous guest, you talked about private fleets and the backhaul, right? So private fleets who are typically hauling their own goods, we saw them coming into the for-hire market to take those backhauls, and that increased capacity maybe to levels that it wouldn't have been if they weren't doing that. But they were in the same boat. They weren't selling as much. Their freight was not in demand, their goods, service, or whatever. And so you saw some of the capacity really kind of it shouldn't have been there the way it was.
So
but the SBA loans. Yeah. Say it again.
Some of the demand was sucked up by that additional capacity because the fleets had trucks to keep running themselves and were acting as for hire versus only hauling their own freight.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that caused some challenges for the for-hire space and for lenders like us, independent lenders, mostly focused in the for-hire segment, although we do have a lot of private fleets on the books as well, but we have a big portion of our book that is in that for-hire segment. So it did create some challenges.
So Kirk, now that we're coming out of this and you are seeing a bit more, I would imagine, demand for equipment and financing, are you seeing more replacement or are you also seeing new entrants?
So I think fleets are, in general, this is anecdotal, but we feel like in general that fleets are resisting increasing their fleet size. We are seeing replacement demand, but I don't think we're seeing 100% replacement demand. I really think folks are, for us to get to that growth phase again, I think folks are looking for the freight side or the demand of freight to increase before they decide to increase the size of their fleet. or even replace some units.
I mean, we had the opportunity here at FreightWaves today to interview, CEO after CEO across the space. And the question we always ask is, because the question isn't whether or not this is a cycle, because we all know it is. If as long as you've been around this industry and as long as I've been around it, as Julie's been around it, we all know this is a cycle, but you don't know how long the cycle is going to take before we sort of get to a downturn. And I think it all depends on how fast capacity returns. But what you're talking about is consistent with what we're hearing, but it's at least talking to CEOs of large companies. Now, some of the analysts that we've had on the show believe it's going to reset much faster. Dr. Jason Miller is one of those. Ken Adamo has made that point. We've heard others that have talked about the fact that the cycle is not going to stay on long. I'm not hearing from any of the folks that we interview that, larger players, that they're adding trucks. A lot of it will say because they can't find drivers. But Kirk, what you're seeing is reinforcing my belief that this is a super cycle.
Yeah, it's been a long one, and we're not happy about it. I don't think anybody is, but I'm not saying that we're not going to recover. I just don't think that it's going to happen to where.
I want to be clear so our audience is not confused. When you say recover, you mean capacity, loans in your world.
Yeah.
In some ways, you're on your business is interesting because you want expansion for loan volume, but you don't want to overcorrect to the point you have a bunch of defaults. But in our world, Kirk, we just want tight markets because that means rates are doing better, capacity's tight.
Yes.
So you're on the other end of that where you want more volume. I'm not sure we agree here.
Well, look, we want more volume when it makes sense, right? Well, because if we take it before the market is tight, as you say, I think that's a great way to look at it, where you have good prices and great capacity. That's a perfect world, and we want that balance. So, I mean, I'm owned by a Japanese company. They are methodical in the way that they look at everything, and they like controlled, profitable growth. And I think in a tight environment like you're talking about, that's where we can do what our owners love for us to do, which is to grow controllably and profitably.
Well, Asian companies, Japanese specifically, but also Chinese, I mean, they're thinking 50-year plans, something that American executives are always like, what's happening next quarter? They're like, what's the quarter? It doesn't matter. Let's talk about the next decade.
Yeah, they are fantastic at thinking 1, 2, 3, 6, 10, you name it. I mean, yes, they have 50-year plans. And that's the mega trends category. The 50-year plans are really focused on what are the mega trends going to be over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And they try to play into that as best they can strategically. But look, where I live, we're focused on 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year at best. And we certainly are looking to the future. But right now, we're meeting the needs of our customers. We're still in the market. We didn't leave. And it's I think, been a big benefit to our dealer customers and to our end user customers as well.
So Kirk, your business specifically, your business is, can't talk. 2 hours, it's Monday still. Your business specifically, is it focused on smaller operators or larger fleets?
Well, that's a great question. I would say historically, we've mostly been focused on the smaller operators, 1 to 5, sometimes 15 to 20 to 25. That to me is a smaller operator. But we're seeing more and more of the 50-unit fleets, 150, 200 unit fleets coming to us through the dealers, and we're doing those loans. And it's just a capacity issue, a liquidity issue among lenders. They're looking for people that will actually lend money in the transportation space, and we're doing it.
And what's the rate? I know that you're going to tell me it's all credit dependent. I know that I borrow lots of money. But rates in terms of where they were relative to a couple of years ago, I mean, obviously we're not longer in ZIRP. I imagine, what's a good rate? What would be someone with the sort of top paper look like in your lending, if you can share that?
Well, if it's a private fleet and it's investment grade, I mean, the banks are coming in at, probably 5.25 in some cases. I mean, we're not gonna quite be there, but we can get pretty froggy. All the way down to the lowest credit grades, for us, probably in the 12% range. If you're talking about a small operator and very little capacity, it's going to be a little higher rate. We're going to ask for a down payment so we keep him good on the equity and we keep his payment where it needs to be for him to be successful or her successful. So, it's a big range, Craig. I always tell people the same thing every time they ask me what my price is, and I tell them I'm going to charge you as much as I possibly can because we need to.
Well said. I love that. And the word froggy.
Yeah.
We're getting froggy right here, Kirk.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, appreciate you coming in.
Go ahead. The only thing I'm a little worried about is I did not get the memo on the powder blue jacket.
It's not intentional.
The weird thing is that Julie and I were talking about this earlier. Is we don't ever coordinate view like stuff, but somehow maybe because we're on the show every day, we kind of just have the same. Taste in clothes.
Both very pale people on a dark background trying to weigh blue.
Blues, my wife is obsessed with blue, so everything. Anytime I buy something that's not blue, I get a hard time, and so it's.
You look great, and I'll tell you, you look great, and I'll tell you, Gina is now, just so you know, she's a full-time GG, and she is.
Congrats.
I mean,
I was afraid to say that because I know that she went to Lean and. Now is being full-time grandmother, so congrats to Gina. She's got the better end of the bargain.
Yeah.
It sounds more fun.
Yeah,
and dealing with freight.
She's a good lady. She was
kids for a long time and then send them
in
home.
Transportation. Yeah. She was bigger in transportation than I'll ever be, but she wants to be a full-time grandmother. So
I don't blame her. I mean, look, freight will always be here, but grandchildren. I'm a father of 5 children, and it's. Sad to see them get older, and you kind of miss the days when they're not going to be that way. I mean, we just wait.
You do.
So, well, congratulations, Kirk. Tell Gina congratulations. She's got the better end of the deal there.
You got it.
But look, another great episode. We're getting froggy here. I'm going to use that term.
You got to figure out how to work it into regular
I'm going to work it into my conversations. I don't even know what it means, but it's cool, and I got to use it. Although I suspect if he's out of Texas, you think it's a TCU fan? Does it have a different meaning? Can't use that if it's TCU. Not here for the Baylor fans. Well, look, we've got a great lineup this week. I do, one thing, Julie, I still have a problem with Russ's description as Match.com. I just don't buy it. I think it's more, if you think about it, if you're on Match, you're supposed to be single, which means you're not married. You follow me for a second?
I 100% follow.
Okay, I don't think he did.
I know exactly what you're saying. But you're not cheating on your private fleet by hauling other freight, right?
That's right. As Match.com, you're not supposed to be married on Match.com.
So I do think the Airbnb analogy is much better. You already own a house and you just are giving some excess capacity out, right?
Years ago, the CFO of DAT called, I used the Match.com description to call DAT. He actually said, no, it's the Ashley Madison. And I said, why?
Ooh.
Because 95% of the people are dudes? No, that wasn't the answer. He goes, because you come back. I thought that was an interesting description. I've used it before.
I don't think I would want to be associated
Ashley
with that
Madison?
in any way.
I thought it was a great analogy. Anyways, tomorrow we'll be right back. We're going to get into Daimler Trucks remarketing. Chris Backer, Berg is going to be back. So can't wait till that happens. We're going to talk trucks and remarketing and used trucks. That's tomorrow on FreightWaves Today.